more people will be joining through this session. And as I say, for me, the best thing about this is just getting people in a room, having ideas, sharing ideas and everything like that. If you, through the process today, you want to ask a question at any point, if you want to put it in the chat, I can pick it up, and then I'll probably then pass the mic to you to perhaps explain your question, and or get perhaps one of the participants or get Jan to actually answer it as well. We have this sort of Batman and Robin sort of cliche in some respects how we operate these sessions. So I do thank everybody for accepting my invitations, my WhatsApp messages or anything like that, so to join us today. As I say, we like to keep them quite informal. We do have a structured approach to it, but ultimately, as I say at the beginning, come in, enjoy it, take one thing away from it that you feel that you can apply, and then I think everyone's a winner. As I say, we run these monthly sessions. This is our blended stories sort of events that we run every month. So this one is very much about how to price your online learning. We know that obviously there's lots of influences that come into that. You know, we won't try to have too much about the AI sort of discussion on this, but it does have an influence to it. And obviously my role, you know, I'm very much in sales. So, you know, I always get the question, right, we need more revenue into the business. That means we need more learners. We need this, that, and the other. But fundamentally, what it does actually mean is that we do need actually a really good pricing structure and a pricing strategy. I was reading some research recently about, I think it was a Harvard review, and they said if you can increase your price by 1%, that actually will return you basically 11% operating profit margin as well. So it is important, and I won't delve on that. But ultimately, sometimes we get the question, don't we? It's like, well, how can I get more revenue into my business? Is it more numbers of people enrollments or anything like that? But ultimately, if we can get the pricing right, that is the biggest influencer that you can actually do with inside your business. And we always get the cliche, look, Paul, I run a 2-day program. I charge $695 to bring someone onto that program. I have it very much instructor led for 2 days. Yes, I get a certificate. We have resources out of it, but how can I make that more of an effective proposition for the business? But ultimately, how can I get the price right? So we're going to use that discussion today is the bit of the mantra from it. From my perspective, you know, we look at the different pricing strategies. We'd also look at, is it a value-based proposition? Because it's also about how you differentiate yourselves in the business as well. So price, I mean, I did a quick search about, I think it was Prince 2 training, and there was a wash of pricings. There's the same product, but how people price it differently. You know, it's really interesting sort of strategy that I have around that as well. So, but anyway, thank you very much, obviously, for accepting the invitation. I'm going to pass the mic over to Jan to take some of the structure through today. But please, any questions to put Jan off his track of discussion is what it's all about. So if we can do that, have a disruptive session, I'm sure then we'll have finished the session with more of a smile on your face. And I can see Richard already smiling, so I think we got trouble already in the room. So Jan, over to you.
Thank you, Paul, or I should say Batman, I think, in this case. With regards to everybody, welcome to another edition of Blended Stories. We do this every month, but we'll tell you later what the next edition is. Today, indeed, about pricing strategy. And too many times I've heard people say, okay, that was an interesting webinar, but what do you guys actually do? So I'm going to take a whole 30 seconds to actually tell you that. So no worries, only 30 seconds. With regards to, we're going to use a screen share this time, which is not our usual mode of operation. So I hope everybody can see this now. Not if you can. With regards to what we do, we work with training companies, training providers like yourself, and we enable all these things that you can see here in the screen. Instructor-led is not what we do. That's what you do. That's what you're good at. You might already do blended and virtual ILT and online. That's our specialization, making blended and online learning and helping you how to scale it up. So that's really what we do. How does that translate into a product portfolio? Well, what we do is we have learning platforms, we have content, whether it's bespoke or content libraries that you can use. We have a number of services that make that work for you, and a number of tools. And our goal is really to create training impact. We really like an evidence-based approach. And what that means is that we help customers with conducting research, we sponsor research. For example, if you're a regular guest at these webinars, you'll know that last month in July, we published our latest research that we do together with University of Oxford. And that was about adoption of blended learning and how people use, for example, AI tools. And we then share that with the community. And this is one of the ways, those webinars, how we share that with the community. So that's really what we do. No rocket science, except for us working with training companies that do rocket science. And Paul already alluded to that. So let's talk about pricing strategy. As Paul already mentioned, this is very much a discussion and not just a monologue. Please don't let me talk all this time. So I'm going to just introduce a few topics within this pricing strategy. And what are some of the big things that determine pricing strategy? Well, actually, it's quite a lot of things. And you will probably tell me, hey, the first thing missing on this list here that we're going to talk about is actually competitors. Well, competitors is one of the things that you might take into account. However, there are a few big elements that quite often get forgotten into creating your pricing strategy, because too many people just look at competitors, and there is more to that. So we're going to talk about these three elements, the top three, and then I'll share a case study as an example of how somebody else, one of our customers, actually used this. So business objectives, where do you want to go with that? Value to your customer, and so value pricing, and lots of different pricing options, just to give you an idea of what kind of options there actually are that you might want to use as a basis for your strategy. Let's talk about those business objectives. I got 3 points here for you that I just want to share, and then I'd like to understand from you, from people, maybe people have examples of how that relates to you. Training delivery strategy is, of course, one element. You do classroom-based training. You might deliver virtual ILT, or in other ways via Zoom, as we do right here, or other tools like Teams. Or you might have a blended strategy. Our definition of that is a little bit of online and a little bit of instructor-led, however you deliver that. And that combination is important. Or online only. And that's quite often to address what I would call the long tail that you can see here in this graph. And that's very much one part that might determine your pricing strategy. Personal point, I think that too many people just give discounts because they think blended and online are not adding the value that it might do. However, that completely depends on your learner. So a good persona building or understanding your customer is really important in setting your pricing strategy as well. With regards to other ways to look at this, how do you look at price? Well, look at your existing courses in the Boston Consulting Group matrix, if you want to Google this. Probably a known element here where you look at the different categories that your courses are in. Cash cows usually being the ones that you make most of your profit in, and well-established products. You don't have to do much marketing, so low costs. And on the other end of the scale, for example, the dogs, where there's hardly any growth in that, you might want to actually not deliver it, because you might actually do this at a loss if you really look at it. Or look at other ways. that your business is going. If you look at a growth strategy, do you want to sell more of the same market penetration, or do you want to get into new markets? A lot of training companies that deliver online learning, online only learning, do that quite often as a product development because it's a new product, but also as a market development, as a getting into new markets, for example, international, or just reaching more of the same people. So those are all elements. Now, that's the end of my monologue. I'd like to understand from the audience what um, do you actually consider these kind of things? Do you look at your business to when you're pricing? For example, are you looking at fast growth, which might mean that you want to get into a market and therefore maybe lower the price at first as a tool to get into that market and steal away other people's business in that sense, or the other way around, would you consider creating a higher price for a product and then get as much profit from it and then lower it later? Paul?
Yeah, Jan, I just got another thought as well, just listening to you. What about the transition of the business that's delivered face to face and then wants to go to blended as well? What about that as a growth strategy? And is that something that people are sort of interested in as well?
Actually, that's a very good point. And actually, the case study that I have later on will show exactly what that looks like. Because a lot of training companies that want to scale up, if you only deliver through instructor-led, so if you're a small training business yourself, then it's very difficult to clone yourself and to scale that up. Some training companies I've seen then create an online-only product. However, the problem with that is that it's a complete new product. It's very difficult to create and get it right the first time. And it's much easier actually to create a blended product where the transition is much smaller, but the scalability of that actually gets much higher. We'll get to that. I have some numbers to share on that. Any examples from other people that have looked at growth strategy, how they want to get into a new market? Let's do this new market. Who has created a course that was for a completely new market? Anybody that's in the room that has something to share on that?
Depends what you mean by new market, yeah.
Okay, not your regular customer. If you do you have something in mind as an example?
We teach a lot of people in business development roles. When putting together proposals, they call upon subject matter experts, and they need help too. And historically, through Shipley, we haven't addressed those people, but actually, I guess it's blended learning. It allows us to address that audience in a very cost-effective way.
I've met a training company that helps engineers be more into business development, and actually they call it more on the sales side. Do you also focus on a particular sector, or is it quite broad?
Any sector.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Just learning to write for your customer is different. That's all.
Mm-hmm. Richard, I think you raised your hand as well, Richard.
Yes, I did, and it's exactly that. It's the sector differential which confuses me. So most of my work, my background has been public sector for many years, and I'm beginning to get requests from the private sector, and it's hard to know where to gauge. Like, for example, I grossly underestimated a request I got, and the provider actually came back and tripled the price I quoted them themselves, which was very generous of them. But it shows how much differential there is between private and public sector. Maybe I'd undercut myself in the first instance, but I was quite shocked at how much more they were prepared to pay for the same product.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we find also as part of your strategy is the friendlies that you have in your network as well to actually test this out as well. So the fact is, I work with a number of business leaders, and they say, Paul, we have no one actually to speak to. We're in this little bubble. We can't actually market test it. We just feel what we feel is in our gut is right. And we look at the competition and we go up or down 10% just to, should we say, just so we feel that we're doing it right. But it's the value proposition, the value pricing differential is the thing that perhaps may be of interest to you that we can talk about in a little bit more detail. But that's quite an interesting point. Public to private sector is always an interesting one. But also the perception of value is different also in public against private. So good. What was that? Just seeing the text coming, vastly different how much public and private sectors are prepared to pay. Very true. I think Richard's just demonstrated that very well. It's one of the chats. Any other sort of questions or challenges around the question that Jan's asked to challenge the question on the question? But it'd be interesting just people's experiences around that. Well, we also see some differences when they're in the non-profit and charitable sector as well. So similar to your challenge of public to private, but also non-profit and charitable as well. Do you have a different pricing matrix for that market space? You know, I've worked with quite a few sort of different charitable organizations and say, we're a charity. Okay, fine. However, and then we build out a different proposition for them. But it's not at the point that Jan talked about. There's no such thing, I believe, in sales as discount, because if you talk about discount, you're devaluing your product set. And I always say there is no such, we would never do a discount. We will look at changing the offering, which changes the cost point, but we do not differentiate and do not discount basically on our standard product set. That's one thing we've always stood by and argued against many times as well. So yeah, Jan, sorry, I'll pass it back over to you, but I was just interested to hear about people's different experiences.
No, it's an interesting point on price, and Richard, that was an excellent example of how different sectors pay different elements. Think of different geographies. I used to work in a global e-learning business, and compared to the UK versus India, for example, in India we charged for the same product, e-learning product, we charged 10% of what we would sell it for in the UK. Now that's a big difference, and you need to sell 10 times more to achieve the same. If you look at it from a revenue perspective, of course, costs of a local operation in India were also lower. But if you look at your pricing, and for example, you put it on the web, on your web page, you sell it in different places. Is it also valid for that country? That's why you see a lot of websites asking first which country are you in, and then giving you the price for that area. Currencies, I see also if you're in international business. I calculated the other day that if I bought something in pounds from this particular provider, or I would pay in dollars, I would actually spend less in pounds if I paid it in dollars. So, and that wasn't a surprise, because we had some customers actually, or they had some customers, I should say, that then started requesting to pay in dollars instead of pounds. So people are very astute on what the value is, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I'll just think of another example. When I was down at the Fire Service College, managing the commercial arm of that, the competitive. I've seen one of your boxes talk about product development. So historically, that was a 12-week program, and because of they wanted new market penetration, they really invested in product development. And what they did is brought the 12-week down to a 9-week program. Still kept it at a fairly high, should we say, price. But what it meant was that they were actually able to bring more volume in, but still kept the actual retail price pretty much at the same. But they were actually able to deliver more, optimizing instructors, but also bringing in elements of, like some of the instructors were having to do all the marking, so then looked at different processes to bring more efficiencies into their product sets, which then ultimately gave them more sort of diversification in different markets for international and for UK growth. Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said, obviously, in new product and product development, to basically have the same perception from the client's perspective of value. So it's quite a complex thing, is pricing. Yeah, good. Okay,
fair point.
Good. Next slide.
Let's go to the next topic here, because there are three kind of areas I promised to cover up, not cover up, cover on. With regards to pricing strategy, it's really important to understand where you're coming from as a market, and we had some great examples of that. There is another element, and that is, what is the actual value you bring to your customer? Now, in a lot of cases, you might probably already know this, but certainly if you go to a new market, or it's quite often worth asking the question or figuring it out with your customer, what is the actual value they get? I loved Richard's example of public to private. Clearly they were anticipating to pay more money, which would indicate that they get a lot of value from it. And I saw the other day, I saw an example where a training provider gave a particular course, and every learner that would do that course would make about £10,000 more income, get a higher salary. They would usually be promoted in their roles. So I would argue that the value of that course was £10,000. Now, this was a course which was about £1,000, I think, maybe 1,500. So it showed good value to the customer, to the learner. But do you know those kind of metrics for yourself? Can I ask randomly, Andrew Smith? We know each other. What is the value, if you're happy to share, that you feel your customer gets from from your training?
So just for background, we're as IT, we deal with data and analytics. It's a IT technical training, helping the likes of banks and life insurers crunch their numbers. So what our customers are wanting to avoid would be somebody doing something wrong with the meters, because of a coding error, has a wrong number in it. So they're looking for what risk do they want to avoid? They want, particularly that, they want to have the reassurance and peace of mind that that individual has received a formal level of training, as opposed to, I mean, there is so much stuff out on Google these days, and a lot of ours is geared for certification, so people can we're teaching them the technical tools to allow them to obtain a certification using a particular piece of software at a variety of levels for a variety of activities. So we're a B2B company, so that the business that purchases the training knows that their staff have got a decent handle on what they should be doing with the data, and they've got the peace of mind that they've been taught by, like to think, people who know what they're doing, and that they have successfully imparted that to the learner.
Okay, thank you for that, Andrew. So that's a clear value.
I think it's, yeah, and I think I think I've come on this call, and I think I said to Paul beforehand, I was just wanting to sort of gauge what the feeling is amongst the community, because we actually increased our prices for the first time in 14 years last week. So we were a classroom-based training. People walked away with paper notes, and that was really up until the pandemic. And then for us, literally weeks prior to that first lockdown, we completed our selection process and went and had that meeting with Jan and said, yeah, we'd love to work with you. and then you know, what we have done, we've been on it's still continuing. We made the very conscious decision to go blended rather than go virtual instructor led and try and do everything that we were doing in the classroom online. It, you know, probably would have been successful, but we decided to take some time out to develop some self-paced e-learning for some of our more technical, heavier concept material that people can go back to, and then have the more sort of practical hands-on stuff, keep that in the virtual classroom. So that's how we feel we are blended. And realistically, the last, you know, the period from, I'd say 2015 to 2016, 17 up to 2020, the numbers in the classroom were going down. Everyone was asking about online, and we kept our prices as they were, just to, you know, to try and attract people in. And we hadn't raised our prices since 2010. And we've now gone through this whole redevelopment period, gone online with the blend, and we, as I say, we put our prices up last week, and I'm thinking, have we done the right thing? So that was partly prompted me to come on this, to see what the feeling in the market was. There you go.
A personal question, Andrew, and please, you feel free not to answer. Did any customers walk away after last week?
No,
Okay.
the person who talked about the differentiation between public and private sector pricing is the private sector, and the dealing with large banks and whatnot. They're not price sensitive, realistically. So you can be bold as long as if you've got that value proposition nailed, that you are going to you stand by that. Yes, people in software, people can Google stuff. It's, you know, can be done, but it's the, you know, having that blend where the instructor tells you why that's important, why that, you know, they've got experience at the coal face to give you the why. Then if they do that, then you're adding the value, you're giving the context and the understanding to the learner. And that's our approach to blend. Give the heavy stuff, the theoretical stuff, make that self-paced, and that people can go to that in their own time, and with the more practical stuff in the virtual classroom. Nobody has questioned it yet.